Hi, welcome to TTOG. We're your hosts, Sarah and Annmarie.
This podcast is not a replacement for therapy. We are therapists. However, we are not providing free therapy.
Welcome back to TTOG. I'm your host, Annmarie.
I'm Sarah.
And on today's episode, we are going to talk about boundaries.
Yay.
We all love those.
We all love them, but can we all form them?
Actually do them. Is another story. Dun, dun, dun.
I know, we need to stop with the backstories with everything. Like, let's just talk. We don't need any
Let's do
backstories.
it. I know.
No,
Boundaries are literally boundaries. What are we going to do?
Kidding. Okay, so we kind of have it broken down into categories.
Okay.
So, overview for everybody really quick. How to form and maintain boundaries. Identifying your personal needs and limits. Communicating them clearly and respectfully. And then reinforcing them when it's challenging.
Right.
So that is like kind of the breakdown that we will be doing. Do you want to start with kind of how we identify our personal needs and limits? We have a lot of our notes on our phone this session.
I think it's
Not
we
this
are
session.
doing therapy today.
Oh,
Don't make me
Lord.
put on my therapist hat.
Gosh, that was so bad.
So bad. It's so important to hold boundaries. And I think,
So important.
oh gosh, but it also is so very hard. That's why we kind of went into that, starting of what those boundaries look like, why they're important to how do we uphold them
Right.
in the grand scheme, because that is so huge
Right.
to be able to do those things.
Right.
Boundaries, I guess, are we thinking emotional boundaries?
I think that anything that kind of keeps our like a clear, I have all my notes here, but like anything that's protecting like your peace, your time, anything that
Yeah.
shows
So
kind of
emotional, physical,
yeah, all
how
of
we
the-
can keep ourselves safe, pretty
Yeah.
much is what I'm
right.
envisioning.
And I feel like it starts with a really big self-reflection.
Yeah.
Like a self-reflection on yourself, nobody else. Your self-reflection of your values,
Morals.
morals, aspects of what you need and want, and not only yourself, but that relationship of romantic, friendship, family, any relationship that needs clear boundaries. Because if we look at it, every relationship, every aspect of your life should have some boundaries, even boundaries for yourself that you
Right. To keep yourself safe.
and
Right.
grounded.
All
Right.
yeah.
Right.
And grounded in reality, right? It's not like, ground myself in fantasy land
Right.
of like, I'm going to have the perfect this, that, and the
Right.
third. And like, I'm
Right.
going to, no, we're not going to do that. We are going to be grounded in that reality of what do we need and want to stay as secure as possible. I think that's
Right.
also really important. It's like, how do we stay secure in those
Right. And
formulations?
I feel as if your boundaries say a lot about who you are as a person also, like in what you value in yourself and in those important relationships. And I feel like these are so difficult sometimes to form and maintain because we don't want to hurt the other people that are going to be offended by those boundaries. And I did just post
Yeah.
this past week for our Fun Friday and like Information Friday about we really have to kind of look at who's offended by those boundaries, because if they're offended because they had access to you when you had no boundaries, then yeah, that's going to stir up any kind of negative emotion because they're used to that individual being boundaryless, and it's kind of going to give them like, okay, why all of a sudden do you need to put these boundaries up?
Exactly. I think the questioning part, that's where we can get broken down. That's where, you have to uphold those boundaries where if they're questioning, it's not that the boundary is wrong.
Right.
Right. I think that's where we were talking last time. It's important.
It does get confusing, especially in the aspect of like, if this is a new thing for that individual that is creating those boundaries, people asking those questions can also kind of force a reality to be like, oh, why am I doing this? Or why do I need this? Or why, like any question that other person is asking because they're offended by that boundary is like, let me think about.
Yeah, and I think going back to our last episode talking about how nature and nurture, our boundaries can change and shape, and
they can look very different.
They can look very different as an adult, right? Your boundaries comparative to mine, and like we're not trying to compare, but just having that reality check of like what my boundaries were when I was 25 look much different as a mom of 3, therapist, wife, like all of those things. They look much different, and there is a reason for them. You know, people can ask like, okay, Annmarie, you had these, you might not have had any boundary, and now your boundary is, you know, a lot of noise, and you know, get emotionally stimulated, and you gotta like walk away. It's like, yes, because I'm not in that same place anymore.
Right.
I can't tolerate that.
Right.
And that's through self-reflection.
Right. And I feel like there's like a lot of different reasons why our boundaries are important. Like my list that I have is like self-respect, because when you're setting boundaries, again, it demonstrates such a depth of self-respect and self-worth, because not everyone is going to view boundaries this way. I'm not saying that it's going to be easy, but the people that care enough about you and deeply about you and are on that kind of emotional awareness will respect that. They don't have to understand. They will just respect that that's something for you. It's not a personal attack. It's something that you need for yourself because you are a high value person.
Right. So what you're saying is, even though I might have different boundaries as you, I still respect you.
That you yes. And to shift a little bit into
a question.
Not really a question, but to shift like why that makes sense self-respect wise. Oh yeah. The other point that I have is healthy boundaries are also essential for healthy relationships. And again, not only romantic, but you form relationships everywhere. We form relationships as client therapists all the time. And if you don't set the precedence of like having that boundary,
lines will be blurred.
And good luck trying to actually enforce those, because it's going to take way longer than it would if you just automatically off the bat had those original boundaries.
And that's where the self-reflection piece about lifelong self-reflection is so crucial for everyone. Is like, you know, if you ask yourself, okay, what are your values? What are your morals? What does that mean to you? And if you say, I don't know, to the majority of the questions people ask you about yourself.
Right. That's an easy, and I hate to say it,
people pleasing at that point.
And not only people pleasing, but that's an easy target.
Yeah.
For a lot of people that don't value themselves. That is a very easy target for a manipulator or a narcissist or any of those types of things. And I'm not saying that that's causing you to be in those situations, but that's definitely a big factor of, I kind of shift it as if you're in a job interview and you answer, I don't know, to a question. That is very, very deceiving for an employer to be like, oh, okay, well, I guess we'll hire you anyway because you don't know why this is important to you or what value you add to a team. So kind of shifting it in that aspect, if it's hard to kind of understand and grasp. Any time you answer, I don't know, is a very telling answer.
You know, I don't know says a lot. Okay, I might not know the answer to that question. If you could just sit in the space of what I do know, right? At least I know what my emotions are.
Right.
At least I know something.
Or what you don't know even about that.
Yeah.
Like, what don't you know about it?
Yeah.
Because if you know, because that's still
Or
knowing.
I'm confused.
You still know a little
Asking
bit.
a little
Right.
bit
Right.
about what's going on is so important.
I don't know.
Me too.
But I also grew up with like, I don't know is not an answer, so you better make an answer.
I better make one up. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
That's a rule. Did I ever say that to you?
What?
There's no room for I don't know in this room. When
Probably. I was so young.
I still say that to a lot of the youngsters, right?
Oh, yeah. Ew. Cut. That's the end of this episode. We hope you enjoyed.
To all the people that, come in, it's like I ask them a question or ask them why they feel that way. And it's very much so I don't know. Your thought process of emotional intelligence or your self-esteem doesn't go down.
That brings me to the next point. I'm super researchy, but it is proven that setting and maintaining boundaries will reduce your stress and brain fog by almost 50%.
Because
that's insane. And
it's like knowing your rules of your life.
Right.
Right. It's like knowing the rules of the road. Right?
Right.
Yes, you cannot go through a red light. Sometimes we imagine that we're going through a red light and it's,
fascinating at the moment, but like repercussion?
Exactly.
Probably not great.
Yeah. But
probably not worth that 5-second wait till the next shift of the light, right? No, but seriously, the overall outlook on your well-being and reducing that everyday stress with that certain relationship or friendship or family member, it is so worth it down the line, because when I tell you it is not worth your stress levels, your emotional and mental well-being, just because you're scared to kind of put those boundaries up because you never had any. Everyone starts somewhere, and I think that it's more important that you start than when you start.
Yeah, and they don't have to be hard boundaries.
Right.
They could be, okay,
Starting
I want to work on my patience. My goodness, that's already setting a precedent for yourself, that you're acknowledging that I'm not great with patience. And now let me tell you, I am not great with patience. I will go 0 to 50 million, but knowing what my boundary is of this is healthy for me. I need to get better at being patient. Patience is a virtue. But that's just, what I mean is not a hard boundary as in I will have patience tomorrow or this or that. That is not how this works. I will not let people walk all over me. Okay, good luck with that. Once you get that information, if you ever get that, like the magic dust of...
Let me know where to find that shit.
Because then you're going to be a zillionaire because that's not...
Well, and
even
I feel like
realistic.
It's the positive self-talk also.
Yeah.
Like, how about we shift that to look like today, let's say someone that you live with pushes the overstepping of how your day is going and stuff like that. How about shifting that I won't let anyone walk all over me anymore to, okay, when I get home today, I will simply say, I don't want to talk about my day right now. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, we have
that consistency maybe in the next week, 2 weeks, month, 5 months will show that, okay, he or she hasn't asked, and maybe they understood that boundary has been created.
That's one of my aha moments that I think a lot of individuals have is they should know my boundary. They should know to not do that.
Yeah.
It's like, how? Are they mind readers?
Right.
They don't know what they don't know. Right. You cannot expect someone to know, oh, I shouldn't say that. Like, what do you mean?
Right. And
I never told them.
That's not saying, I hate this. Like, so this is where we kind of have different viewpoints because
It's fine.
I understand everything that she's saying and respect it, but in another light, that does not mean that people don't know how to be decent human beings.
Oh, absolutely.
So, like, they know not to be a piece of shit in a relationship or be a shitty friend or X, Y, and Z. Now,
bare minimum.
People,
yes.
right? Like, people don't know. Oh, maybe if I do this, like, do you think it's stepping over a boundary that she hasn't voiced she had? Probably not, because you haven't voiced. So, like, that's where I get your aspect. But then, like, certain boundaries, there are clear life boundaries that, like, okay, that makes me not a very nice person or not a great human.
Right. It's going to your example of if I come home from work and maybe I had a bad day, but I have not vocalized that.
Right.
Or I come here and I'm like, you know, I got my face on. That's not so happy, right? Yes, you can see that I might not be in the best of moods, but that doesn't mean that I have to just assume that you know what I'm thinking. I have to be able to vocalize what is going on because I'm part of the problem if I don't. Right. And I'm like, oh, why didn't they ask how my day was? Or can't they see that I'm not in a good mood? It's like, you have to take ownership for that. So your boundaries are your boundaries. And you have to be okay with vocalizing, knowing and expecting people are going to ask you why.
Right. And that's another piece of it. Going back to that little video we posted on our Instagram, like, you have to ask yourself, I feel like, the why when people start getting upset about your boundaries. Like, you don't have to ask them why they're getting upset because that piece doesn't matter to you. If I sat here and told you I'm not coming in until this time to the office, my schedule changed. And you kept calling me and calling me before that time and didn't understand it, and you were getting mad that I changed this. Okay, it wouldn't be, not that she does this obviously, but like, I wouldn't be saying, okay, I'm gonna have to ask her why she's doing this because it's pissing me off. I would honestly sit there and ask myself, I never really had any boundaries. I never really told her, no, I can't do this. Why is she getting upset that I now have boundaries? Because I am not accessible to her at all times. And that shifts. I will advocate for this till the day I die.
Yes.
When someone has all access to you and then it changes even the slightest bit of schedule or timing or whatever, and that person starts to freak out, it's because they knew you to be a boundaryless human in their life. And now you're creating these boundaries and it's offending them because
it's new to them. It's new, and they're probably not the right people
to be in your
life.
Because again, going back to that respect piece, people aren't. There's going to be more of a percentage of people that don't understand your boundaries than do. But that's not what's important.
Correct.
What's important is the people that respect those boundaries and the people that don't. Because you can't do both. You can't not understand the boundaries and disrespect them. You got to pick one. Because if you're doing both, that is just not okay. Because that shows me that you might have no boundaries and you expect everyone around you not to have boundaries.
Yeah.
And that's a personal thing, but you can't, just because I have a lot of boundaries, I can't expect you to have a lot. You might have one less than me, one more than me. That doesn't mean anything. I respect how little or how much or how big or how small those boundaries look.
Right. I think the important part of that, which I'll add, is the expectation part of people's boundaries. When we hold a lot of boundaries or when we start vocalizing our boundaries, we almost get into that space of, now I'm going to expect you to have some.
Yeah.
And we can't do that.
Right.
Boundaries are our own thing, like lifelong. Right. And they have to adjust with where we are.
Right.
Now, if we internalize and understand that maybe we have changed as people and maybe they
Evolved.
came along with me. Great.
Right.
Like, did I just sprinkle a little bit of like yay in their life and they created some boundaries? Great.
Right.
Now let's have a conversation about it. And now, does that work for us in our relationship? But I think that goes into one of the last things that we're going to touch on is, now do we fit together?
Right. It's just a complex idea because not that it's a hard concept to grasp, but it looks different for everybody. So we could talk about everything about boundaries, but it also could look a little bit different to you
Yeah.
or
And
whoever's listening, you know?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the main ones that at least I hear in my life are when we're in relationships, right? Intimate or non-relationships is
Right.
when we're in conflict, what do we do? What do I do? Do I walk away? Do I stay? Do I ask a million questions? What do I need? Right? And I think that's the one thing that I say to people. You have to get to know what you need in those moments of distress. When you're in
Fight or
flight,
Right.
what do you need?
Right.
Look back and reflect on what has happened to you over the years with your family, with your friends, with your significant others, adults, right? If I never would tell my best friend, hey, I don't love that you don't support our podcast
Right.
and you don't share, like, it's important to vocalize. Because they can't expect, right?
And that brings me to the point of like vocalizing clearly and respectfully. That piece I think is the hardest. Like, okay, so we created our boundaries and we're going to start to enforce them. But this is where people, me at least, I struggle a little bit because being Italian and being so hard-headed, communicating anything clearly and respectfully is difficult for me. Now that doesn't mean that I'm being disrespectful, but finding a way to kind of balance the clearly stating the issue and respectfully saying that this is for me and not for you to understand.
Right.
That could be a struggle for anybody, you know?
And I think that goes back to the first thing is that what do you need? Right? What are the boundaries that I might need in my life? It's not that I want the boundaries, right? I don't want all the boundaries. I don't want to have to tell people always what I need, but I have to have healthy, secure relationships. It is so important.
Be healthy and secure within yourself.
Correct.
Also, like that is a huge thing.
Right.
And nobody's saying that these boundaries have to be a forever thing.
Yeah.
Right?
They grow with yourself.
Right. They grow with you or they don't. They don't grow.
Maybe in that minute, that's the boundary I needed. Okay.
Right.
I don't have to keep it forever. That's where the reflection part comes from. Do I need this today?
I feel like it also, with the communication aspect, when you're vocalizing your boundaries, I'm going to say this from experience of being talked to and talking to.
Yeah.
Using the statement you when I am trying to tell you my boundaries is not respectful. It is so degrading and attacking that it almost feels like you're creating the boundaries for me. You know, like
based on what their beliefs
are.
are.
To tell you. So if I was trying to tell Annmarie, I have these boundaries, but I'm saying you did this and you crossed this and you caused this, so now I have.
Yeah, no, it's not healthy. And now we're gonna go into like combative mode of, well, no, I didn't.
Yeah.
Now this is what I did.
Right.
And this is how it made you feel of over and over again.
Not only self-sabotage, these notes went out the door.
They absolutely
Boundary
do.
notes, bye. Like now it started the cycle of like, why did I even come up with these boundaries if that's how I'm going to communicate them? Because if I'm communicating them that way and they're not being enforced how they're supposed to, it doesn't really matter what boundaries you have anymore because they don't sound like boundaries. They sound like
Demands.
Being a dictatorship.
Yeah, so I think it's so important on how we do vocalize those things, because if they are coming off as attacking, someone is going to say no. And then how are we going to then come back and have confidence to then say, I know that didn't work. Right. Now what do we do? Right? That conflict resolution. Now that's out the door. And now our self-confidence is out the door. If I can't do it, if I can't set a clear boundary with you, or if I can't set a clear boundary with my parents, who am I going to be able to set a boundary with?
Right. And then you can't expect to set boundaries for yourself.
Correct.
Either. Like in yourself. Like
right.
That don't have to be communicated to anybody, but communicated with yourself.
Right.
It also gets sticky. And
yeah.
we also can't expect everyone's brains to run at the same capacity.
Yeah.
And if someone's going to talk like that about their boundaries, you have to also, that's another piece of like analyzing if that's the right fit for someone to be in your life. Because if you're communicating your boundaries in a clear, effective, respectful manner, and the person across from you is communicating their boundaries, but communicating them like how I just explained, that is not going to change.
Yeah.
If not ever, or a long time, if we're not doing some self-reflection or intensive
work
for that stuff.
Yeah.
But it's just true. Like, and you can't control that aspect of other people. Again, you can only control the boundaries that
the controllable
you
that you create and uphold.
Yeah.
And how we uphold them is continuing to try. That's the importance of really everything in life. We can't expect that the first time we're ever going to set a boundary, it's going to go butterflies and roses and everything's wonderful. Right. It's going to fall flat on our face. It's how consistent we need to be with the boundaries and who we honestly can start with, right? So my recommendation is, if you're starting to understand what your boundaries are, if you're trying to vocalize those boundaries, go to someone first that might understand what boundaries means, right? Maybe it's someone you don't talk to regularly all the time. Maybe it's an aunt, maybe it's an uncle, maybe it's like your best friend that and really
maybe it is your therapist.
Maybe it is, right? Because they're gonna understand.
Or maybe it's your therapist friend. You don't have to be asking
your significant other.
No,
let's not go there. Let's not go there first. You need to go for a win at first.
Right.
You have to
yourself.
It's funny, like, sometimes doing it in public.
Yeah.
Right? Like, let's say you order a salad, and mind you, yes, I'm Italian, but I hate tomatoes, whole tomatoes. Can't stand it. Ooh, that's not for me.
She loves pizza and sauce.
Right. Explain that one. But let's say I'm just starting out with boundaries, okay? Usually, I will say nothing, and I'll just pick them and put them on the side of my plate and just say nothing, right? Because that's conflict. Right. Oh gosh, what are they going to think of me when I tell them, please, can you take that back? No tomato.
Right.
Now it's first starting that
battle.
Yeah, you got to, right.
Now it's again, those stress levels come up, those emotional distress, like all that. And I know, like, taking tomatoes off is silly to say, like, emotional distress, but like, what if that was an allergy or something? Like, you have to set those boundaries because it can cause so many different levels to skyrocket.
Yeah, and we don't know. And we don't know. Right, as people. So I'm saying do that because, again, one, that's their job. And two, that's an easy, they're going to say yes. Yeah. And then you're going to be like, oh, that wasn't that hard to tell them, like, hey, I really didn't want tomatoes
and
on
don't
there.
let it discourage you if, like, I'm going to keep using your example, but don't let it discourage you if you have someone that hates their job or is having a bad day or is struggling with themselves, because it might not always be, I'll do that. It might be, I'll do that, but
roll of the eye.
Right. So don't let that aspect discourage you.
I love that.
So pick
the easies.
Right. Start off with the easies. So the next aspect that we'll move to is the 4 C's of boundaries.
Oh boy.
So I'll just list them off and then we'll talk.
Please.
Okay. So there's the first C is clear. Boundaries should be easily understood and stated clearly. Check. Consistent. Boundaries need to be enforced regularly and reliably. Check, which your example. Consensually. When boundaries are crossed, there should be clear and appropriate consequences. Tricky. We didn't talk about that one yet, but we will.
Yeah.
And then compassionate. While enforcing the boundaries, it's important to be mindful of others' feelings and needs, finding a balance between firmness and empathy. That's a nice one.
That is very nice.
Those last two can be blurry.
Very.
So we'll talk about the consequences. It is going to be extremely difficult to have any sort of consequence if you still can't vocalize the boundaries at hand, right? So like what you were saying about the tomatoes. If you still can't tell people in your life that are supposed to be high value people, these are my boundaries, you will not be able to give consequences for breaking those boundaries because you haven't effectively said the boundaries or made the boundaries clear.
Right.
So that is also a difficult aspect because before we get to those last two C's, the first two C's have to be so good that you can do them over and over
again.
Before we even touch the last two.
Exactly. And like those look so different for everyone.
Right.
But I think it's important to, again, you have to go back to what are my values, what are my morals, what am I not willing, what are my, this is my line. I'm not going past that, right? Okay, let's go into like a personal one, right? For me, okay? I will not, I will not stand for someone hitting me, no matter who you are. Put your hands on me, no go for me, right? That is a hard no, right? Those are easy ones.
Right.
Like you can go with that. I think those are the general gist of like what people really do want in their lives. But then it becomes blurry.
Right.
Because I will not let people beat me down with their words is much different than I will not let someone put their hands on me, right? So that's how complex it gets, and that's why how clear and reflective you need to be with what your values and morals are first.
Right.
And talking those through with yourself daily.
Right.
Daily.
Right.
Is so crucial.
Right. Like that mirror work, that inner mirror work. Something funny that I used to do when I was in high school. I think I told you this as my therapist. I would put a baby picture on my mirror. And then every time I'm looking into the mirror talking badly, I would be talking to her. And like, who wants to talk to a child that way? And like,
would you ever?
Right. That's what I'm saying. Never.
Right. Would you ever let your inner kid do some of the things that we do now? No. And why do we do that? Right? It's that little self-sabotagey.
I think one of my personal boundaries is I hate when I tell you despise the word bitch. I don't care who, like, I hate it. Like, I'll say, me and my friends can be like, that's fine. But if someone
is targeting you,
anybody in a nasty, vulgar, attacking way, dad, brother, significant others, friends, like, I just think it's such a classless and mean thing to say about someone because especially when it's far from the truth, like, I hate that. Like, that's
degrading.
You don't. No, you're not.
See, I like that. So those are clear.
Right.
You're just being regular, good human beings. Please don't do that.
Right.
I think those aren't
hard. Those aren't hard. And if they're hard for somebody, goodbye. Because those should not be the hard boundaries. The hard boundaries should be like
when we're in a conflict.
Right.
In
like
talking.
That's another aspect of the boundaries is like if someone can't respect the small things, like you're going to have a hell of a time dealing with the high conflict resolution things.
Yeah. Right.
So
It's important to be very clear with self. What are my hard no's? What are my
what
hard
am
yeses?
I
Yeah.
can maybe
Maybe.
tweak to be like situational or stuff
Exactly.
like that. 'Cause
Exactly.
that will happen. Like that definitely will happen per certain scenarios, tweaking those boundaries
Right.
a little bit and tweaking them for the right people. You might have the same boundary for 3 people and it might be able to be tweaked for just 1 or 2.
Just
And
more fluid. You can
the one person needs to stand tall because you just know that if
Exactly.
it isn't, then every boundary is going to be blurred.
Yes, exactly. But it's knowing those. Ooh, I keep going back to that. You have to know what you need in your life, how you are successful in your life. Those are the people that you need to grow boundaries with.
Right. I love it.
Yeah,
So I'll
compassionate.
read it again. While enforcing the boundaries, it's important to be mindful of others' feelings and needs. So finding a balance between firmness and empathy. So again, it kind of goes back to that doesn't mean, I know someone's going to be like, so we should care about other people when making our own boundaries. That's not what that means. What that means is being firm but empathetic based on how you're verbalizing this boundary and where you're putting it. If people aren't clear because they've known you to be someone with no boundaries, putting that and enforcing that is going to be tricky. So being empathetic will only bring that high like contact resolution down to like a lower medium because it's being communicated effectively and compassionately.
Yeah, for me, when I think about that, is very much so I'm going to agree to disagree. I can be there, right? I cannot hold the exact same value or maybe hold that
appreciate
to
it.
the highest level of where
Right,
yours is.
right.
But I'm going to be in the space of like, okay, she holds that value. I don't hold the exact same one, but I know I hold a big one. So I can kind of understand
and
where that is coming from. And I am going to respect it
Right,
and
right.
say, okay, I disagree, but I still love you for that.
Right. But that brings it back to there's 2 people. There's the people that don't necessarily understand the boundary and respect it. And then there's the person that doesn't understand the boundary and doesn't respect it. And that's where I think this piece comes into play is you have to have that person where it's kind of like beliefs and values of like, I'm Catholic, but the next person might not be Catholic, but I respect you believe in something so passionately that I'm happy for you. And I respect that boundary of you go to church every Sunday or you can't eat meat on Fridays during Lent. I can, but I respect that. So we'll go to a restaurant that offers both meat and fish on a Friday.
Yeah. And someone being willing and able
to adjust
to those things.
I'm not going to sit here and be like, okay, if they don't,
I'm going to cut you out. Absolutely not.
You do have to kind of overanalyze how often that's happening.
Exactly.
How often
That's
you're
the
not
internal
willing
work.
to adjust. Because if you're willing to adjust to somebody 9 times out of 10 and they're willing to adjust to you 2 out of 10, that is a very disconnected relationship.
Guess how much resentment is going to build in that. And then where does that go to? That goes to
high conflict,
high toxic relationships. And I know that word is so prevalent right now, but it's so true. It's so hard to know what the line is because everyone's perception of what that looks like is very different.
Right.
And I think that just goes for the clear boundaries of like how much is enough, how much is not enough. Okay, if they're 2, if they're 2 out of 10, okay, at least it's not 0 out of 10. And I was like, I understand that, but like
that might be good for you, but not for me.
Right.
I need it to be at least half, 50-50, 5 out of 10.
But we don't think in those ways.
Right.
We don't think, okay, if this person continues to do that, what is it going to look like when I have to say like, hey, this is a problem for me.
Right.
This is not working. This is hurting me.
Right. No,
Or this is like making me question myself through what we're talking
lens
about.
of you.
The lens of
Right.
you is very much so, right now I'm in rose-colored glasses. It's like, that's not fair. No one deserves to feel that way on either side.
Right.
On either side, because sometimes holding the high level of, there are some people that hold the standards and they're going to hold their standards until the cows come home and they're never going to come home.
Right.
But they know the people that they can get along with. That's the meshing part of, if they don't fit, stop trying to force them to fit in that mold, because they don't.
Right.
They just don't.
Yeah.
And it's being okay with saying no.
I love it.
But we have to know when we can
that
say
is
no
prevalent,
and
right.
when we can't.
Right.
If we've never said, no in our lives,
Right.
and you're going to expect in a relationship we're going to say no, good luck.
Yes, I agree. Okay, so to end the episode, we are going to touch on the question of how do we as individuals identify our boundaries. So what that looks like to us. I will go first. I would say that I pay attention mostly to my emotional and physical needs. So if those two things aren't being met, again, for me, more than 5 times out of 10, then we're gonna have an issue. Over 5 times out of 10, probably more towards, honestly, 7 and an 8, which is high for me, but I know that I am worth that. I need a 7 or an 8 out of 10, because again, not everyone is going to work to full capacity all the time. Everyone has bad days. Everybody has those challenging thoughts. And if I'm getting 7 to 8 out of 10 on full running individuals, I am happy, because I know I'm giving more than that. I know that I can, if you're giving me a 7 out of 10, I know that I can make up for that 3 in myself.
Yeah.
And if you're giving me 8, I know for sure that I can make up 2. So that, I feel like, is how I identify what I need in boundaries, or my own boundaries, is paying attention to my physical and emotional needs of each situation and each individual.
Right. And to even add on that, it goes into those global concepts of, here are my global morals, values. Like, that's going to be more consistent in nature,
Right.
where the day-to-day is more, you have to look at yourself and be like, okay, where am I? Right? What do I need? I might be in a bad mood and I might need a little bit more, like, out of that person. And then I'm expecting it and then it doesn't happen.
Right.
That's hard. Right?
I agree.
Where the communication, right? 1, know yourself. 2, we have to communicate. 3, we have to be able to also, as people that are holding the boundaries, to be able to see the people making efforts to uphold your boundary.
Right.
Even though it might not look exactly how we would do it ourselves. That's the struggle I think I've seen even in my own life and in individuals that I see, is the fact of, well, that's not how I would do it, so they cannot be holding my boundaries to the fullest of extent. It's like, right, because they're not you.
Right.
They're never going to hold the same boundary, never going to put the value in your boundary the way that you are, and it's not going to look the same, and we have to be okay with that. We have to be okay with that. The boundaries are fluid in nature.
Right.
With the day-to-day, right? Which I was saying before. They're fluid in the day-to-day. However, we have to be compassionate to know where they are. If I know maybe, someone across from me is not having a good day, maybe in therapy, okay? Maybe they come in I can kind of understand their gist. We have to know that I'm not going to say that, hey, we're not going to work on that today. It's very much so, you have to be fluid. We have to be in the understanding of, like, today we're not going to push that envelope.
Right.
Today we're kind of going to be okay with self, right? Be okay that this is not going to work all the time, every single day, right? Because that feels like a lot to have to work on the boundaries every single day together. Like, no, everybody absolutely can have a bad day. Now, how am I going to make sure I'm holding my own boundary? Yay.
All the things boundaries.
Boundaries.
I think that wraps up this week's episode. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
When people set boundaries with you, it's their attempt to continue their relationship with you. It's not an attempt to hurt you.